We're looking at Unit 5 now, which kind of picks up where Unit 2 left off. In Unit 2, we learned how to connect with classes that other people have written. So we learned how to call methods, how to interact with their constructors, what instance fields were. We're going to start writing our own classes. When we write those classes, one of the things we're going to have to do is designate our access and visibility constraints. And we're going to apply that to classes, data, which would be the instance fields, constructors, and the methods. Remember, these are always kind of like your big three pieces anytime you write a class: the instance fields, the constructors, the methods. Turns out that we can make any of those things public or private. There's actually a couple other settings too, but they're not required by the College Board for this AP class. We're just going to focus on the two restraint levels, public versus private. And this video is going to show you when we write a class what to do in terms of labeling the class, okay, all of the data, your instance fields, the constructors, and the methods. There's various rules that could be applied here. We're going to take the approach that the College Board lays out. These are all College Board notes, and they have a few expectations for how they'd like you to set up all of the classes that you write for this course. So in this, we have to understand that the keyword private restricts access to the declaring class, while public allows access from classes outside of the declaring class. So to give you an example, I made up a sample declaring class here called a zombie dog. Think of a video game or something, and there's zombie dogs running around that you're trying to kill. I don't know. Okay. So this is my declaring class right here. I'm declaring, okay, my class, called it zombie dog. And here I've got some instance fields. So these are the properties, okay, of a zombie dog. It has health points, it has an attack power, and it can be a mutant. Okay. These are my constructors, my default constructor. Okay. 100 is the standard health value, attack power 1, not a mutant. Or I'm going to allow the user to pick the health points and the attack power in overload of the constructor. I've got a few different methods. These first few methods we'll see later in this chapter called mutator or modifier methods. They change the state of the object. That means that they're going to change these instance fields. Now, if I did not actually set any access control here, I wouldn't really need these mutator methods because somebody could actually just access these instance fields. And I'll show you that in a minute, start changing them. We're going to try to restrict that access and kind of limit it, all right? Here I have some basic accessor methods, which could be used to reveal the values of those instance fields. And here I have a couple of just various action methods like an attack method and a print state method, which just gives a quick update on everything about that zombie dog. Now, one of the first things we see here is that classes are designated public. Right, you might notice that in Replit, they don't actually do that. So Replit just writes class name. They could, if they wanted, actually set the access level to public. It was on something called default or package, and it's a little bit different, but again, we're not really going to get into that stuff. It's not required for the AP course. We just look at public versus private. As you start writing your own classes, the College Board would like you to declare your classes as public. So even though Replit doesn't, okay, and you don't technically need to, they do want you to. You notice in my zombie dog, I didn't do that yet. I just wrote class zombie dog, and my code's running fine. Okay, and it's actually going to run fine if I take the word public off here. But again, we're learning some best practices today, some College Board expectations, some of these things, you know, like we're only dealing with the AP subset. We're not actually learning all of the different access levels. So if you'd like to read more about this stuff, you could, okay, look up what like protected or package or default are, Java. But we're going to make that class public, like I just did right here, okay? If you tried to make a class private access, it would actually just result in an instant error. It's just going to tell you that it's not allowed here. So we're going to designate classes only as public. Let me get to the distinction between public and private in a little couple seconds here. So next thing is we're going to hide the access to our data. So it says access to attributes. Those are your instance fields. Should be kept internal to the class. Therefore, instance variables are designated as private. Okay, so right now I haven't done that. And as a result, somebody could actually grab from an outside class any of those variables that I created. And so you can see right here, they could actually kind of reset the health points of this zombie dog 100 to 2000, or they could turn it into a mutant. And maybe you've played a video game like this before, and your friends have found a way to hack it and set the health points to some sort of like unlimited value or something. Right now, I could do that because I didn't restrict the access to that variable. So somebody could actually take those health points and put in like a really large value, or they could mutate the dog. If I didn't want anyone to be able to do that so easily, okay, I could make these instance fields private. So right here, if I added the access level private in front of these instance fields, okay, the way it's stated in our notes is that this restricts their usage to the declaring class. What that means is, remember, this is the declaring class. You write code in here, you're in the declaring class. So you can still use this variable health points anywhere you want throughout this class. That's totally fine, okay? You're in the declaring class. You can use attack power anywhere you want within this declaring class, okay? But the minute that you step out of this class and go to another class, such as main, you're now going to be cut off from that access. So watch what happens now. I'm going to get error messages in line 42 and 43 because I've changed those access levels. Now, if somebody tried to take the health points and initialize it to a new value or change the value of mutant, well, they're going to run into an error message. Right here, line 42, line 43, those variables have private access. Now I can't access them from outside of the declaring class. So both of these methods here are going to, both of these variables, okay, are going to result in error. So I'm going to turn that code off so that we don't see that error message again. The College Board expects you to always do this, even if they don't tell you. You're going to get a question on your AP test where you write an entire class from start to finish, public, class, whatever. You're going to put the instance fields in, you're going to put the constructors in, you're going to put the methods in. When you do that, okay, same thing in my class, right? You are expected to write public before the class and private before any instance fields. All right, well, let's see what else we're supposed to do. Constructors are designated as public. That always the case? No. In the math class, the constructor is private, so that users can't make objects from it. But for the classes that you write in my course and on your AP exam, you're expected to label your constructors private. Again, if you notice, I haven't done that yet, and all of this code is technically working, right? It's interacting with the main, there's no errors. But again, you're supposed to set this to public. Okay, if you set either of these to private, what would happen is that no one would be able to access them from outside of here. So for example, if I wrote private right here, no one could access that default constructor from outside of this class. So if I stepped back to main and I tried to run that default constructor, line 34 is now going to give me an error message, okay, because I won't be able to access it private. So I'm going to set that back to public. So again, so far what we've seen, Board expects you to make your class public, okay? Your instance fields private, and your zombie dog or your constructor, right, should be public as well. All right. So public class, private instance fields, public constructor. Those are just rules. Like that doesn't change. Okay. The one that is given a little bit more freedom in our course are the methods. So access to behaviors, those are your methods, the things you can do, can be internal, which would be like private, or external to the class, which would be public. So methods could be either. When we look at classes that the College Board writes for us or other people's classes, we might see private methods. And if we see them, then we have to understand that if we're writing code inside of that class, we're free to use them. As soon as we step out, we can't. Why would we make a method private? Well, in truth, there might only be one or two cases this whole year where we actually really see a need to make a method private. It's not something we're going to do a lot of. But typically, a method would be private if you only felt that it was maybe like kind of like what we call a helper method, where maybe it's doing some sort of complex calculation and you're only using it. You don't really feel the need to let anyone else use it. Maybe it's even like a trade secret or something. You don't want anyone to know what you did. Then you could make it private and then it would be encapsulated within this class and no one else would have access to it unless they actually had your source code, which maybe you keep hidden. So, in this problem here, okay, what I'm going to do, for example, is I'm going to make this change health method public. Now, what that does is not only does it give somebody else access to it, but I've now given a way for somebody to actually change the health. Remember earlier, once I made this private, no one could just grab that variable from an outside class and put a really big number in there. Now, what I'm doing is I've kind of taken it and given them limited access. I've kind of taken partial control. So I've given them a method that they could call because it's public and they could put in a number and the health points would go up or down if it was a negative number. And if here's the catch though, they put in a really big number, if it goes over 100, I'll just cap it off back at 100. So if we went back and tried to do something kind of like what we saw a minute ago with right here when they were remember when they were trying to put that really big health points in, if I did that now a little differently, if I called this public method change health, supposed to be a period. It's kind of dark in here. I can't really see the keyboard. Change health. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put in that really big number. Now, here's the difference. It won't go all the way up to that number, right? Remember what my method did? My method's going to cap it at 100. So even though that number looks to increase it way past 100, the way that I wrote that method, I actually didn't let them go past. Okay. Maybe I want this method to be public. So I might let the user increase the attack power, but again, I won't let them just put some really big number in there. They couldn't just put in 1,000,000. In fact, I didn't even let them put a number in, but they couldn't. They can only call this method so many times because once they call it to a point where the attack power gets to 10, it just cuts it off. So it would let it get to 9, increment it, it would hit 10, but they can't get past 10 using this method. And then maybe this method, who knows? Maybe let's say, for example, maybe you want to make this method private. And what that would mean is no one from outside of this class could call it. So nobody could just mutate a zombie dog. There is a way to do it that if the health drops below 0, then it becomes a mutant. Okay. Again, I was just trying to make some silly example for you here. So now if I went back here and made this like a negative number, okay, what that would do is it would drop the health down really low. It would kick in that mutant method. And oh, I'm sorry. Down here, I was calling mutate method and it was private, so that's good. Once I made it private, notice I could no longer call the method from an external class, but I will be able to call it internally. So like right here, it mutated the dog. That's because right here, I was able to call the method internally, right? In the declaring class where the method is being declared, that's legal. What I can't do is I can't step out of the class and try to call it externally, right? That's illegal. That's what they're talking about right here. Okay. The rest of this stuff just kind of shows like in a summary sense. Okay. This is something we're going to actually come back to in Unit 9. In Unit 9, we're going to write more of like a class hierarchy. So we might create like a generic class called zombie animal or zombie pet. And then we might make a bunch of subclasses of that actually share a bunch of common stuff. Like maybe all zombie pets have health points and attack power and the ability to mutate. But then maybe for like zombie cat and zombie dog, they have some differences. Maybe there's a zombie rat or a zombie hamster or whatever. And then we could start making subclasses of these different zombie pets that have slight differences, but maybe they share a lot of stuff, and we actually would put that in a common class, sometimes called the super class. Um, all right, so just to highlight some of the things from this, right? Designate private visibility of instance variables. This process is called encapsulation when you hide information within the object, within the class. The idea of keeping your data private. Okay. What happens on the client side when we change the access of the instance fields to private? If you remember, what that did was it meant that we couldn't access them anymore. Okay, so they are no longer um, able to be accessed from external sources like your main method. Okay. Now, again, that's called encapsulation. The same thing happens when we do that to a method. Okay. So, like when we change the mutate method to private, same thing. No one from an external class could access it any longer. And it says that the provided accessor and mutator methods in this class allow us to modify the data. Says, how have I limited that? So the way that I limited the ability to change, if you remember, was like in that change health method. So in the change health method, I was letting them change the health, but not unlimited. They couldn't put in an enormous number, for example. I capped it off at 100. I changed their ability to increase the tack power. They couldn't go past. That's only because I made them private, so no one can directly access those variables. But then I made a public method that kind of coincided with those variables to allow them to make changes. They had to make the changes under my rules. And then I took away their ability to actually directly mutate the dog. They had to do it kind of under the rules that I set up by decreasing health points. It would make sense to make all of these accessor methods public. Okay. So each one should be set to public because the whole point of these is that you're going to give people the ability to see these values. But notice how there's no equals signs here, right? There's no assignment that ever takes place. There's no parameter coming in. There's no changes being made. So this is another example of limited access. You can see the values, but you can't change them. And then these methods have like maybe like multiple purposes. So these methods should probably be made public also. Okay, so the user could call the attack method and they could just to get a quick all those variable values.